doing? Good day, pre-algebra. Going over CO5. Equivalent fractions. You've done those before. You've simplified fractions before. Whether or not you realize it, you've solved proportions before. This is a really good kind of review objective, but it's important because it ties into why we just did greatest common factor. Okay, we can use greatest common factor for some of these equivalent fractions and simplifying fractions. Folks, can we put binaries flat on the table so we don't have to turn around, sit sideways, face front? Okay, thank you. So first of all, green is still in timeout. Can't use that one. What does it mean when two things are equivalent? What does it mean when two things are equivalent? I'm sorry if I wasn't clear in my directions before. We can set this right up there, face the front. That's how we roll. What does it mean for two things to be equivalent, Cade? Equal. What about them is equal? Jeffrey? Not necessarily. In fact, with fractions, if I tell you that 1/2 is equal to 3/6, those certainly don't look the same, right? The numbers are all different, the denominators are different, everything's different, yet they're equivalent. They're equal. So yes, they're equal, but what about them is equal? Camille? Have the same value. Okay. Equivalency means equal values, right? The numbers are all different. If you knew nothing about fractions, you'd say those aren't the same, right? They're all different, right? But what is the same as their value? They both have a value of 1/2. Okay? Oh, that means write down what we're doing here. Okay? So we can jump right into Mr. Happy Pencil, right? It says write two equivalent fractions for each given fraction. Check your answer by comparing the decimal values of all three fractions. Let's start with 8/10 because 3/7 is kind of a funky one here. 8/10 is our given fraction. How can I find an equivalent fraction to 8/10? Wyatt? How do you get that? Right. So we can simplify by dividing. Oops, I wrote divided by 4. By dividing both the numerator and the denominator by 2, and that gives us 4/5. How else could I get an equivalent fraction? Haley? How'd you get 16/20? I could also multiply both by 2, or really anything. Multiply by 10, by 3, by 4.5, right? As long as I multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the same thing, I'm going to get an equivalent fraction. Okay? So these are just two sample answers. It then says to check your answer by comparing the decimal values. How do I do that? Everybody take out your calculator. If you don't have your calculator, just sit tight. I'm not going to let you go grab it from a locker. Okay? Especially with backpacks, calculators, stick it right in your front pocket and just bring with you everywhere. How would you calculate the value of the fraction 8/10? Let's get our original fraction first. John? Yep, so just hit the clear button and you'll be good to go. How do you calculate the decimal value of 8/10 using a calculator? We talked about how to do this not using a calculator back in CO2, but how would you use a calculator? Because some of these don't have friendly denominators. Lexi, sorry. Okay, Camille, you had your hand up too? Exactly. Remember that a fraction is really just division. So if you take 8 divided by 10, what do you get? 0.8. Okay? So the decimal value of our original fraction is 0.8. Now go to 4/5. And you're going to divide 4 by 5. What do you get? 0.8. Now you're going to go to 16/20. And you can probably predict what we're going to get when we take 16 divided by 20. 0.8. Well, there's no 16 button. You have to press 1 and then 6. No, we're verifying that our two equivalent fractions match the same value as our one. So even though these three fractions all look different, the numbers aren't the same. They're different apart from each other. Everything about them is different. They're equivalent because their values, 0.8, are the same. Okay? So as you're working through this, depending on what you do, you'll all get different answers here as far as your equivalent fractions. Some of you might have multiplied by 3 or by 5 or by 6 or whatever, right? You might get all different answers. However, when you compare those decimal values, they're all going to be the same. Griffin. Try it. What's 800 divided by 1,000? 0.8. So, yep, that would be fine. Sophie.
When doing the homework, do you have to have three fractions like you just did, or do you only have to?
When you're doing your homework, it should look like what I have here. You've got your original fraction, you've got your two equivalent fractions, and then the decimal values for all three fractions. So you can compare them back to the original. Okay? Pick another one on here that looks particularly interesting, challenging, fun. Evan. 3/7. Okay? Let's start by writing our equivalent fractions. What do you want to do to 3/7, Evan, to get an equivalent fraction? It's already in simplest form, so we're kind of locked into multiplying here. So what do you want to multiply by? Great. Multiply by 3. And as long as we do it to both the numerator and the denominator, we will be okay. That gives us 9/21 as an equivalent fraction. What would someone else like to do to 3/7 to get an equivalent fraction? Blake. Multiply by 2. Okay. Multiplying each of them by 2 gives us 6/14. Now we got to see if they're all equivalent. Did we do this correctly? So in your calculator, you're going to take 3 divided by 7, which gives you kind of a nasty decimal. So it's okay to round this one to the nearest hundredth. Okay? It's probably something like 0.42 or 0.43. So round up to 0.43? That? So 0.43 after you round it? Okay. So 0.43 after rounding to the nearest hundredth. 9/21 should be the same ugly decimal, right? When you divide 9 by 21, you should get the same long decimal that you can then round to 0.43. Same thing with 6 divided by 14. Divide that, you get that same long decimal that rounds to 0.43. That's how you know you've done it correctly. Different fractions, numbers are all different, but they're equivalent because their values are the same. Yeah, Kylie. Yeah, go ahead. Sure. Yeah. What Kylie's asking is, for 24/36, she divided by 2 to get an equivalent fraction of 12/18. She's saying, can she do that again to get another equivalent fraction? By all means, certainly. Okay. If you want to take that 12/18 and divide by 2 or by 3. You got options here. To get 6/9, that can count as your second equivalent fraction. Then you'd go and you compare the decimals of all 3 fractions to make sure they're the same. Yep. Good. Good. Anything else with this section here? Okay. How we can use equivalent fractions, it's fun to find them, right? Fraction fun, equivalent fractions. But how we can use them is solving proportions, which I'd like you to look at well, here, let's define it first. What is a proportion? Are we all going to learn something new today? I love when this happens. Well, then what is it? Tell me. Oh, you can't remember. Okay. Abby, what's a proportion?
It's kind of like algebra.
It can be like algebra because we're gonna have variables, but just the definition of a proportion. Griffin? Okay. Basically, it's 2 equivalent fractions. A proportion is simply 2 equivalent fractions. When Kylie took her 24/36 and she wrote that as 12/18, that's a proportion. 2 equivalent fractions make a proportion. If you look at the next page, you can see that we also involve some variables, which is why Abby said we've got some algebra going on here. But we can use equivalent fractions to help us solve proportions. The first one, 1/2 equals n/60. Tell me what the value of n is. Griffin, how'd you get there? Yeah. Okay. Recognizing that we've got a fraction of 1/2. Well, 1 is half of 2, so n is half of 60. That's going to be 30. Did anybody do a different way? How do you get from 2 to 60? How do you get from 2 to 60? Kate? Multiply by 30. So what are we going to do to 1 to get to n? Multiply by 30. Right? And 1 times 30 equals 30. The next one, what does n equal? 12/15 equals something over 30. Wyatt? How'd you get that? Right. 15 times 2 is 30. So 12 times 2 has to be 24. You see how we're using equivalent fractions here? Right? To solve these proportions. Quentin. I'm getting there. Okay? Getting there. Look at the next section, where our variable is now in the first fraction. How do we handle this? Haley? Oh. Now we're kind of working with division here. 72 divided by what number gives us 12? Remember, we can find equivalent fractions with division also, right? 72 divided by what number is 12, Tony? Divided by 6. So what are we going to do to our 24? Divide by 6. What do we get? 24 divided by 6? 4. So n equals 4. The next one. How do we get from 99 to 33? Kylie? Divide by 3. So what are we going to do to 51 to get to n? Divide by 3. Anyone know what 51 divided by 3 is? Haley? 17. So n is 17. Okay? Lexi? So cross products works also here. I'm not showing you cross products for this because the focus is on equivalent fractions where everything works out here. But cross products is another method that if you'd like to do that, that also works. But it's not the focus of this, so I'm not bringing it up yet. Okay. Your homework is both pages up until the happy globe. Okay, you do not need to do the globe that all it wants is a hug. All right? Yikes. Okay. On the first page, remember to write those decimal values for your equivalent fractions to compare them. On the second page, I need to show the work that you do. If you use cross products, show me the cross products. If you use equivalent fractions with the arrows, show me exactly what I did here. Okay, do not just put an answer down. I need to see more than that. All right? Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, compliments, congratulations, or criticisms? Yes, John.
Congratulations.
For what?
$1 million.
I wish. I wish that was the truth, John. If I had $1 million, I would move to Fiji. You'd have a substitute for the rest of the school year. Yeah, Fiji. No offense against you, but I mean, yeah. You could buy lots of phones. Okay, we're going down the rabbit hole. Kind of my fault. Sorry about that, but I'll bring you back. Shh. Cade? Okay. John, we're done. All right, folks. Homework due tomorrow. That is How You Math.